Taek and Naram were hurled backward by the force of the sound. Taek struck the ground hard enough to see sparks. He scrambled up, expecting the beast to crush them both. Instead, it staggered once, then stood still. Blood flowed, but not as heavily now. The behemoth turned its head and looked at them again. Something had changed in its gaze. The old fury had thinned. Slowly, immensely, it dipped its head. A bow, or something like one. Then the great beast pivoted and began to walk east. Taek stared after it. Naram spat dust from his mouth. "By all sacred fires," he whispered, "it wants us to follow." The eastern cliffs were farther than they appeared. The behemoth moved at a pace that felt slow only because of its size. In truth, Taek and Naram had to hurry to keep up. The sun slanted lower. Shadows stretched long across the valley. Once, the creature paused atop a low rise, and the last light burned around it, turning its hide to bronze and its silhouette into myth. The cliffs opened at last into a canyon walled by stone polished smooth by ages of water. At its end stood a cleft barely visible behind a curtain of hanging ivy and trailing roots. The behemoth halted there and stepped aside. Cold air breathed from the hidden opening. Taek looked at Naram. Naram looked as though he wanted to be anywhere else in creation. Inside, the passage descended by natural steps into darkness blue as twilight. Taek lit a resin torch. The walls glittered with mineral veins. Far below came the sound of water. The tunnel opened into a cavern, so beautiful it stole speech. A spring rose from the heart of the stone, clear as glass, spilling into a pool bright with its own pale light. Ferns grew around it, impossibly green in the darkness. Above, a crack in the roof admitted one narrow shaft of evening sun that struck the water and turned it into liquid gold. The mouth of heaven. Taek fell to his knees in gratitude. He filled both flasks, then knelt longer, letting relief shake through him. Myra might live. The journey, the fear, the impossible valley, none of it had been for nothing. Naram touched the water reverently. The old stories were true. Behind them, a distant rumble sounded from the entrance. The behemoth was waiting. When they emerged, night was gathering across Keld. The first stars kindled above the plain. The giant stood against the darkening sky, vast and silent, like the final guardian of a lost age. Taek approached it one last time. "I cannot repay you," he said softly. The behemoth exhaled. Its breath stirred his hair and cloak. He thought then of all the fearful stories men told around fires. Monster, devourer, curse of the valley. But the truth stood before him, not evil, only mighty, not cruel, only ancient beyond their understanding. Men had brought spears because men always feared what they could not rule. The creature turned from them and walked back into the wilderness. Its tail swayed like a cedar in the wind. Its limbs moved with the dreadful grace of living pillars. Moonlight silvered the ridges of its back until it seemed less beast than moving hill, less animal than a fragment of creation itself, still wandering beneath the heavens. Taek watched until it disappeared into the grasslands. The journey home was no easier, but hope made burdens lighter. They crossed the Red Barrens in 5 days. On the 6th, Taek burst into his father's house with dust on his face and the spring sealed in both flasks. Myra was fading when he reached her bedside. Her eyes were half closed. Her breathing was a whisper. Taek lifted her gently and touched the water to her lips. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then color returned slowly, like dawn entering a room. Her breath deepened. The strain in her face eased. When her eyes opened fully, they were clear. "Taek," she whispered. He laughed and wept at once. Word of the miracle spread through the city. Priests came. Healers asked questions. Nobles offered gold for directions to the spring. Taek told them only this, that the valley was under the watch of a creature older and greater than their ambitions, and that no spear would ever guide a man safely there. Many thought him mad. Some thought him blessed. A few believed him. But on quiet nights, When the wind moved through the cedars outside the city walls, Tayak would remember the living mountain standing under the storm-lit sky, grazing on grass like an ox while power rippled through its ancient frame. He would remember the bones like bronze, the limbs like iron, the earth trembling beneath every step. And he would remember the moment it bowed its head. Years later, when Tayak himself had gone grey and children gathered at his feet for stories, they always asked for the same one. Tell us of the giant in Keld. So he would begin with the broken ridge and the golden plain, with fear and thunder and raiders destroyed like sparks before a flood. He would tell of the spear torn free, of the hidden cavern, of the water that shone in darkness. But at the end, he always spoke not of danger, but of wonder. There are powers in this world, he would say, that were not made for us to tame. We honor them best by humility. And sometimes, on the farthest edge of memory, he could still hear it, a sound rolling across the wilderness like thunder under the earth, the voice of the behemoth wandering where men did not belong, beneath the stars that had watched it since the first morning of the world.